Hey, a poor guy like you, a high school dropout, doesn't belong in such a fancy hotel. At the reunion, I never expected to go through something like that. My name is Alex. I was born and raised in a poor family. Because of that, I was often harassed by my classmates in elementary school. My clothes were ragged, and unlike everyone else's homes, we didn't have any video games. Obviously poor, living in a run-down house, I was a clear outlier in the eyes of my classmates. Kids can be cruel, saying hurtful things without a second thought, and that's why I faced harassment. Especially Brandon, a classmate, was the worst in harassing me. "Hey Alex, a poor guy like you shouldn't be eating the same school lunch as us." Saying that, Brandon would sometimes spill my lunch on the floor and tell me to eat it, or he'd cut my backpack with a cutter, saying, "Shouldn't a poor person's backpack look more worn out?" He carried out such mean-spirited harassment. Despite his obvious successes, not only the other classmates, but even our teacher, Mr. Thompson, turned a blind eye. Brandon, whose father was a company president, was the typical rich kid, using his power as a shield. That's why no one dared to stand up to him. Brandon's harassment continued even in middle school. It seemed like I was his target, just for being poor, but I never understood why he was so persistent. "Too bad, Alex. As long as I'm the rich kid, nobody is going to help you," he said with a mocking laugh. His attitude was repulsive. But I had no intention of giving in to such things. "If you want to harass me, go ahead, but I'm not going to lose just because of that." Perhaps impressed by my attitude, gradually, I gained friends who supported me. Brandon probably hoped his harassment would make me look pathetic, but having even a few friends on my side meant I wasn't easily shaken. I always kept top grades in school. Though I refused to give in to the harassment, I am human after all. I did feel angry and frustrated when ridiculed. I studied hard every day, hoping good grades might change how others saw me. Well, Alex, top of the class again in this testament. I was praised for my good performance. But Brandon didn't like that. "You, a poor guy, don't get cocky." Brandon was angry because I surpassed him in test rankings. He was quite smart, and his grades were commendable, but losing to me seemed to irk him. As a result, Brandon's harassment escalated. He would throw away my textbooks and notebooks, and fill my desk with trash, tirelessly doing such things every day. After enduring so much, I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Enough already. Isn't it embarrassing to do such childish harassment in middle school?" I confronted Brandon. But he just laughed it off, saying, "Shut up. Poor people should just live miserably at the bottom." I realized it was useless to argue with him. That's when it happened. "Hey Brandon, what did you just say?" A sudden shout. It was our teacher, Mr. Williams. He must have heard our conversation and was coming over. "Why are you two fighting?" he asked. I honestly told him everything that had happened. Mr. Williams looked surprised for a moment, but then turned to Brandon with a serious face. "Brandon, it's true that Alex's family might be struggling financially, but it's wrong to ridicule that. Such behavior is for small-minded people." Mr. Williams spoke. "Whether poor or rich, we are all human beings just the same. Moreover, life is unpredictable. Your circumstances can flip at any time. What matters most isn't pride, but the consideration we show towards others." His words deeply resonated with me. Brandon awkwardly left the scene. I thanked Mr. Williams. "I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner, but you've done well to persevere. Keep that resilience. It'll be important in the future." I nodded at Mr. Williams' words. That day, I vowed to become a kind and strong person. This would become a pivotal influence in my later life. Time passed, and my middle school days were nearly over. The harassment from Brandon had ceased. Whether it was Mr. Williams' influence or the fact that it became harder for Brandon to act out, I'm not sure, but my school life was peaceful. Then, one day, we had a parent-teacher conference to discuss future plans. I had written on my career aspiration form that I intended to work. As expected, Mr. Williams questioned this. "Alex, are you really set on working? It's not impossible to find work as a middle school graduate, but wouldn't it be better to at least attend high school?" It wasn't unreasonable for Mr. Williams to think so. I was probably the only one in the entire school planning to work after middle school. But I had my reasons for this decision. "Mr. Williams, I want to start working early to support my family. Of course, there might not be many places that hire a middle school graduate, but I want to give back to my parents who have raised me this far." Mr. Williams' eyes welled up at my words. "I see. Good luck, Alex," he said, patting my shoulder. After graduating from middle school, I started working at a local inn in Nebraska. "Hey Alex, what are you dawdling for?" "Yes, sorry." Starting at the bottom, I initially struggled with the work and was scolded daily. But the reason I never faltered was because Mr. Williams' words were always in my heart. The desire to ease my family's burden, coupled with the determination to never run away no matter how tough things got, were my pillars of strength. Thanks to these, I was determined to quickly learn the job. Among those who were particularly strict with me was Mrs. Stewart, the innkeeper. "You still lack the awareness of being a professional. I appreciate your hard work, but your manners towards guests still need improvement." I thought I was being careful with my customer service, but Mrs. Stewart, as the inn's owner, was on another level. Her use of language and the small acts of consideration she showed were far beyond what I could offer, truly embodying the spirit of hospitality. "Alex, this inn doesn't just operate because of its staff. First and foremost, it's the guests who choose to stay with us that allow us to run this place." Her words made me realize something. I had been so focused on my tasks that I hadn't properly looked at the guests' faces. Even if I saw them now, I'd barely remember them. Despite my endurance, I was still lacking in consideration. With Mrs. Stewart's guidance, I changed my approach to work. I started looking guests in the eye when speaking to them and acting with more thoughtfulness. "Hey young man, you're doing a good job. Even small acts of kindness add up to make a pleasant experience." That day, I was praised by a guest for the first time. Their words filled me with joy, and I understood what Mrs. Stewart meant. Such thoughtfulness not only pleases the guests but also brings joy to ourselves. Realizing this, I slowly nurtured a spirit of hospitality. Gradually, Mrs. Stewart and the other employees began to recognize my efforts. "Recently, Alex, you've really started to smile more. Your smiling service makes even us feel good," said Mrs. Stewart. "It's all thanks to your guidance. Honestly, it was tough at first, but now I take pride in my work," I replied. Those words came from the heart. Then one day, after finishing work, I received a call from Mr. Williams on my phone. "Hey Alex, always hard at work. How's it going? Are you getting used to the job?" "I'm managing. Thank you for always caring," I replied. I had been in frequent contact with Mr. Williams even after graduation. He seemed concerned about my decision to start working and often checked in. "I'm planning to host a home party soon. Would you like to come?" "Yes, I'd love to attend." Mr. Williams regularly hosted home parties, inviting acquaintances. And thankfully, I was always invited. Through these events, I had become quite familiar with Mr. Williams' family. 10 years had passed since I started working. I felt I have grown a lot, getting used to the job and even being involved in training new staff. Then, one day, I received a letter. It was an invitation to a middle school reunion. Attendees were asked to RSVP and bring the invitation on the day. The reunion was also going to celebrate Mr. Williams' retirement. I've been under Mr. Williams' care for so long. I should definitely go and celebrate. With gratitude for Mr. Williams in my heart, I confirmed my attendance at the reunion. On the day of the reunion, I arrived at the upscale hotel serving as the venue. Wow, it's really fancy here, fitting for the guest of honor. Upon arrival, I wanted to greet Mr. Williams, but it seemed everyone had the same idea. There was a long line to meet him. Looks like it'll take some time to greet him. I decided to wait and looked around at my former classmates. Alex, over here, a friend from middle school, with whom I had been close, spotted me and called out. I sat next to him, feeling joy at seeing a familiar face. It's been a while. You started working right after middle school, so we didn't have many chances to meet. You haven't changed a bit, I replied. His bright smile reminded me of our middle school days. There was something comforting about seeing him unchanged. We spent some time catching up over drinks and food, reminiscing about old times. That's when it happened. What is a pool guy like you here in a place like this? I heard a mocking voice from behind. Of course, it was Brandon. He approached with a disdainful smile. And my friend by my side looked displeased. Hey, this is a luxury hotel, a high school dropout, and a poor guy like you shouldn't be here. I honestly hadn't expected to face his sarcasm after 10 years. I had hoped that Mr. Williams' words in middle school would have made some impact, but clearly, they hadn't. I remembered hearing that Brandon had joined his father's company after graduating from college. However, Brandon's personality remained unchanged, and even in college, he used his father's name to do as he pleased. As a result, he never made genuine friends. The only people around him were those attracted to his power and wealth. There was no real trust or meaningful relationships in his circle, just superficial connections. He doesn't know what true friendship is. That's why he can say such thoughtless things without considering others or the place. Thinking about it, I felt pity for him. Having his father as a shield, Brandon only maintained relationships with those who benefited from it. If he ever lost that shield, he would truly be alone. Thinking about this, I lost the urge to retaliate. Perhaps this perspective came from my experience in the hospitality industry. But Brandon, heedless of my feelings, continued to hurl insults. You don't belong here. Why don't you just leave? It was at that moment, sighing at his unchanging spitefulness, that Mr. Williams approached us. Brandon, are you still saying such things? Saying that, Mr. Williams approached us. It seemed the long line to greet him had finally settled. Mr. Williams, I'm not wrong. A luxurious hotel meal like this costs a lot. A poor guy like him shouldn't be here, Brandon argued. Indeed, this hotel is famous enough to be frequented by celebrities. It's not a place where the average salaried worker could easily afford to come. That's probably why Brandon thought I was out of place here. But then, Mr. Williams spoke to him. Do you know nothing, Brandon? This hotel is provided by Alex. What, really? Brandon couldn't hide his surprise. Yes, I was now the leader of a new business division in a hotel chain. Assigned directly by Mrs. Stewart to spearhead our group's expansion, I had acquired several inns and hotels, including this one. When Mr. Williams wanted a special place for his retirement celebration, I offered this hotel. Alex has been working hard for the past 10 years, wanting to make life easier for his family. He studied at night, not just working but also learning to succeed in business, Mr. Williams explained. Everything he said was true. I had earned Mrs. Stewart's trust and been entrusted with this business. To repay her, I studied after work, aiming to make the business a success. I believe that the efforts I've made over these past 10 years have finally blossomed into success. No way. That can't be true. It's not a lie. This is all a result of Alex's efforts. Having watched over me all these years, Mr. Williams understood my journey well. I owed my success to my family and Mr. Williams' support. As I was reflecting on this, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, Alex is here too. Emily, you're here as well." She was Emily, Mr. Williams' daughter. Since meeting her at the first home party I attended, we had become close friends. "Wow, you have such a cute girlfriend," my friend teased with a grin. I felt a bit embarrassed by his remark. Why do you always get everything?" Brandon suddenly raised his voice. The room quieted as everyone's attention turned to us. Ignoring this, Brandon continued, "You're good at studying, have trustworthy friends, and even though you're poor, you succeed in everything. It's not fair." It seemed these were Brandon's true feelings. I learned that since childhood, Brandon had been labeled the black sheep of his family. Compared to his siblings, who excelled in various fields, he was considered lacking in talent and struggled to find his place at home. In contrast, I excelled academically and always enjoyed my time with friends. He said he couldn't stand the fact that, despite being rich and standing on the brink of despair, I, poorer and at a lower social level, was enjoying life. For that reason, he harassed me to reassure himself that there were people lower than him, finding his sense of worth in doing so. "Brandon, that's not right," I said. "I know, you wouldn't understand the despair and sadness of being rejected by your own parents," Brandon retorted, breaking down in tears. The surroundings became uneasy at his breakdown. "Brandon, stand up. What you did was wrong, but you've always maintained excellent grades, haven't you? That's proof of your effort." Indeed, he might have been fixated on being the top of the class, but he consistently held the second spot in our grades. That's no small feat. Besides, you got into high school and college because you studied hard. You didn't need to step on others to achieve your own success. Brandon's face showed a startled realization at my words. It seemed he was finally aware of it himself. He probably worked harder than any of his siblings. Surely, he had achieved significant results. But the goals set for him were simply too high, an unreasonably steep threshold to meet. Your father and siblings don't define you, Brandon. You should aim for goals that satisfy you. I'm sure you can do it, I encouraged. Alex, I'm sorry for everything. Brandon finally apologized. Mr. Williams was also moved to tears by this scene. Come on, now that everything's resolved, let's not dwell on it, let's celebrate. When my friends called out to the crowd, applause came from all around the venue. That applause was likely directed at Brandon, acknowledging his newfound understanding and reconciliation. The reunion and Mr. Williams' celebration concluded peacefully. Time passed, and on a day in June, I held my wedding with Emily. The venue was the same hotel where the reunion took place. Family, friends, Mr. Williams, Mrs. Stewart, and even Brandon attended. Surrounded by blessings, we embraced our happiness. Brandon had quit his father's company and severed ties with his family. He was working part-time and job hunting. Occasionally, he dines out with us, always asking to be introduced to a woman. Everyone walks different paths, sometimes straying in the wrong direction. But the common truth is that we can choose our own path. This applies to our value as people, too. Not determined by birth or status, but changeable with our own efforts. Both Brandon and I have engraved this in our hearts. To remember and keep striving, without forgetting this lesson.